Hello and welcome to Path to Power. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
So we're getting closer and closer to our general election here in Ireland. Yes, we're also aware US presidential election, but we're not going to be talking about that today. We're saving that for a little bit of a special next week, which will be released the Friday before the Tuesday election. So no American politics today, but there's still so much to talk about what's going on at home. Heather Humphreys' departure from Fine Gael, Mary Lou McDonald facing the likes of the Monk, and Clare Daly as potential candidates in the Dublin Central constituency, and lots of other things to talk about. But let's start with the damn date, Ivan, because it looks like now it's as good as certain that it's going to be the 29th of November. Although I'd make an argument that if they're going to go that late, they should wait another week until the 6th of December. And the reason they should wait till the 6th of December is that's the week in which the big social welfare double payments get made. And it's always better to have money in people's pockets rather than the promise of it the following week.
Well, for the first time, I'm genuinely surprised at you because
for the first time.
You sent me a text a couple of weeks ago saying that whenever the election is, there's a possibility we might be going on the Late Late Show. If it's on Friday the 6th, the Toy Show will be on and we won't be on after 10 p.m. and the polls close. So it's not in the interest of Path to Power to have it on the 6th, so therefore it won't be on the 6th.
Well,
the only reason why it's not going to be on the 29th is because Rodrigo Gorman said it was going to be on the 29th. But I agree with you that when you do the arithmetic of the finance bill and the diary and work it back, and the Dáil dissolution has to be sort of on that Friday after you can do it the Thursday or the Friday, but you have to have a Dáil sitting day, okay? So what is that, Friday the 8th or something like that? Yeah, Friday the 8th or Thursday the 7th, the Dáil will be dissolved. And then... But look, let's be clear. Every politician I try and talk to, I'm in the middle of a canvass here on the doorstep. You know, so the campaign is on. It's a long campaign.
Well, actually, as you know, I was saying they couldn't do it on the 8th of November because of Rugby International. There's another one on the 15th. People are saying you can't do it the night of the Late Late Toy Show, but the Late Late Toy Show doesn't come on air until 9:30. So that gives people plenty of time to go and vote beforehand, whereas the Rugby International is on the 8th. And I'll tell you, I have a problem with the 29th, another personal problem. And you're going to laugh your head off at this one. But that's the night that there's the big gala dinner for the IRFU celebrating 150 years of Irish rugby. And that's where I'm going to be that particular night.
But you can vote early and often.
Of course I will vote early. I'm saying I will vote. But I don't want the distraction when I'm going to be enjoying myself at that gala rugby night.
Well, yeah. Well, I'd put it like this. I think it will be the 29th. I see no reason why it won't be the 29th. They've publicly committed to a 24 election, and I think that's as good as done and dusted. The manifestos, I understand, are completed. The selection conventions, which we'll come to in terms of it, have been... it's always, you put back the ones that are most problematic and tricky, and then it comes back to bite you, because instead of a problem sort of soothed or, by deferral, it actually blows up in your face, as we see in a couple of constituencies, not least Tipperary North for Fianna Fáil. But at the end of the day, it's full steam ahead. And the thing that causes me a difficulty is because my stock in trade for all my sources would be people I would consider friends in politics, both apparatchiks, individuals who are candidates and so on. And when you get into the febrile phase of an election, they actually believe that all their friends are supporters of theirs. And they're saying, Ivan, would you do this photo op? Can you do this? And I'm kind of saying, well, that's where I was maybe 20 years ago. It's not where I am now. So it's all a bit ox for me.
Would you not charge them, Ivan? A bit like Nigel Farage.
You can rest assured. You can rest assured that is my default position. And saying that, like the Late Late Show, you just can't afford me.
So I can see it now. So Ivan Yates videos with particular candidates that'll be sent out via social media, and we discover afterwards. So how much would you charge for something like that?
Careful what you wish for as well.
Would you think it was an Ivan Yates endorsement going to win a vote, though?
Oscar Wilde. Now that we've established Ivan as a prostitute, we just have to work out the price.
Okay, there's been lots of interesting things coming up. I mean, one of the things that's quite clear is that there's not going to be an official re-elect the government campaign. Everyone's going to be ploughing their own furrow. And a couple of things that I noticed were interesting is that Fine Gael have decided that Paschal Donoghue has been given the job of being the housing spokesperson, and Jennifer Carroll McNeil has been given the job of, what is it that she's... on health, isn't it?
Yeah, and childcare is Neil Richmond, all the ones they don't have frontline ministries on. So, in relation to the transfers thing, interesting point. First of all, the accusation will be that there is not a scintilla of difference between Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, and therefore to have a transfer pact would have only fed into that kind of Mary Lou opposition charge against them. But the reality is that mutual transfers between both parties will hit a historic high during this. They are absolutely joined at the hip. The second reason why they couldn't do a transfer pact is that they have eyes on a replacement for the Greens.
Yeah.
And so therefore, particularly, they would be very friendly towards mutual reciprocity with the Labour Party, who would be their first choice. And in some cases, take Kerry, they wouldn't be against if the Healy-Raes had a few spare preferences, or if Lowry had a few spare preferences in North Tipperary to get them from independence.
Fine Gael are particularly bad position down in Kerry, so they need all the help they can get from other people for transferring.
So therefore, I think those are the two reasons for it. But it's a bit like the election will run full term. This is what I'm saying in terms of no transfers. This is what I'm really thinking. We have never been more hugger-mugger together.
I'm thinking out loud here because it's going to be a little bit of an issue for us on the last word when it comes to having our debates and discussions. So suddenly we're going to be having, say, for example, maybe housing debates, and Owen Bryn will be front and centre for Sinn Féin. Maybe the Social Democrats will be trying to push forward Rory Hearn as their housing person, the professor down in Maynooth. And then you'll have Darragh O'Brien from Fianna Fáil, and suddenly you'll have Paschal Donoghue from Fine Gael, who presumably will be saying all the same things as Fianna Fáil are saying.
Even more difficult when it comes to the leader debates, because is it fair to have a trio of debates? In other words, those parties who are, the highest rating and have the most seats going into the election, all north of 30, that would be FFFG and Sinn Féin. Is that 2 against 1? Now, I could see how Mary Lou could play that to her advantage.
As she did in 2020, when she was admitted to the debates.
The more likely scenario is to do what we did on tonight, which is a rula bulla of 7, which would include those 3 plus 1 independent nominee, Soc Dem, Labour and Greens. So that gets you up to 7. And you could rotate. I was just going to say
that's very difficult to control, although actually, in retrospect, you were more difficult to control than the 7 leaders that particular night, but we won't go back there.
Well, so what I would say is that all of this will be a subject of much angst and debate, but I don't know if it actually makes any difference.
I wonder actually, when I think about it now, again, I'm thinking out loud, and again, because I have to finalise all of my radio ideas in relation to this, as to whether debates actually illuminate things much, whether actually just one person interviews when you drill in actually maybe work better in getting the information that voters want about what will happen in the next government. Yeah,
gaffes or one-liners tend to be the memorable part of it. Kremlin versus Kremlin from the Euros and so on. Yeah. Very few memorable knockout blows. But just some couple of emerging trends that from where I sit, because so my process for the 43 constituencies is to take a deep dive into the local election results, the candidate selection once it's completed, and then talk to each of the parties. And I spoke to the Greens this week. The first trend I'm coming to, just from the bottom up, is that I struggled to get too far beyond 60 seats for left-wing TDs. In other words, people before profit, Pringle or Independence for Change, coupled with Soc Dems, Greens and Labour and all of that, I'm struggling to get it past 60, which means that the prospect of Sinn Féin leading a left-wing government, that's even giving Soc Dems and Labour double-digit figures and being optimistic about it. The second...
Sorry, can I just stop you and hold your second point for a second? I think that's really interesting on 2 fronts. One is that mean, historically, the idea of 60 left-wing TDs in Dáil Éireann that's a very, very high number. Now, I know it doesn't get you near the new threshold for getting elected, but
90 is the threshold.
Which shows, but it does show a shift in the way that Irish politics are going. But it also brings up this thing that is going to be a major problem in the election, I think, for everybody, is that who's going to offer an alternative government? That there's an awful lot of people who might want to get rid of this government, and they've been told, well, the numbers don't add up for anybody else to have a government. So what does that do then for the public interest in this actual election process? If you feel like, well, even if you want to get rid of the government, there isn't necessarily an alternative available to you that you want, unless you want to push those left-wing parties above 90 seats.
I think this is a very profound point. And I break it down. This is as near as you get to class politics. This is the actual divide between the haves and the have-nots, between the boomers and the dispossessed young people, and so on. So I think it's actually quite profound, this. But I'm just saying that when I add up, give people before profit 7, give, the Greens 5 or 6, give Soc Dems 10 or 12, give Labour 10 or 12, give Sinn Féin. Like, they are actually competing against each other, but there is a ceiling beyond which, once you hit into the self-employed, rural, middle-class areas, they're not natural voters of the left. And if you look at the outgoing left seats and you add in 14 extra seats, that's the kind of level where I see the glass ceiling.
Okay, so are we entering into this bizarre situation whereby what we will be arguing about, or what we will be voting on, is, do you want Simon Harris or Micheál Martin to be the leader of a government where they're in coalition? And could it be that it'll be a race to see if one of them gets to be Taoiseach for the entire term, or whether they will actually have to share power?
Well, put it like this. I always think when you're putting a government together, the largest party has to make the most concessions. That's why the Greens got such a good deal. Put it like this, I'm just, because it is impossible to say whether Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil will get more TD. It's just impossible. Like, you come up with a figure of 42, 3 for each of them on a good day. You come up on a bad day with them for 37, 38, and so on. The second...
Sorry, actually, I'm sorry, I know I'm jumping in again. And hold that second point. There's a book coming out in November. I've got an advance copy of it, and we might talk about it in more
Have you
detail.
got a book out this?
Not sure,
this is the first time in a long time. You had Jamie Heathcliff, you had Who Cares Who Owns the Country, and various other weighty tomes.
Yes, there's another one on the way next year as it happens. But anyway, I'm just reading a book by an old colleague of yours, which will be released in early November. So I think I'm probably...
Is someone out of Limerick prison? Who?
I'm not sure if I'm breaking an embargo, because the book isn't released until the 7th of November, but I'm sure he won't
mind. Shane Kenny?
Yes.
Yes.
Have you seen it?
I was invited to the launch, and greatly, because it's at night time and because...
And you weren't paid enough to go?
Exactly. No, but Shane was the press officer for the government, and I received a very kind invite, and I wish him well with the book. I always rated him as a really good...
Very good book.
Like, he was one of the people that made the News at One back in the day, and made the This Week programme and all those. Like, there was an appointment to listen to some of those RT radio programmes, which, no fault to the journalists, just isn't the case anymore.
Well, let me just tell you.
I have to go on and tell you something else.
Let me tell you.
Public knowledge that.
Yeah, sorry. I know what the content of it, but I've only started reading it. I can't remember the name of it. I will tell people in a future
I haven't lawyered it yet, because I'm told I'm referred to in it.
You are. I checked out the references to you in the book.
Right, well, I haven't seen the book,
Anyway, so... But he actually, and it comes back to the point about the bigger party having to give things, and the early section of it, and it's exceptionally well written, what I've read of it so far, and I'm looking forward to finishing it all. And I am going to interview him on my Magnified podcast.
And actually, I put it like this: that will be a rarity, be well worth listening to, from the point of view that. And can I just say what you should ask him about was the most, shall we just say, frantic time was Phil Hogan's resignation.
Yes, I read that section already.
To be honest with you, my feeling at the time was, because Phil was a very close friend of mine, and how has it come to this? And Phil had done a lot to support John Bruton in the heaves that led to the formation of the Rainbow government, and was owed and owing, and it was a vital early stage of his career. The word was that Shane Kenny decreed Hogan had to go, and that caused. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know.
That's
but the
not
point
the way it quite comes out in the book.
Okay.
Far from it, actually. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is, coming back to why I brought this up, when John Bruton was agonising about putting together the government with Labour and Democratic left, basically he surrendered finance to Rory Quinn and foreign affairs to Dick Spring. And, so he was sort of wondering, can you... And the whole point was that it was emphasised to him, look, you want to be Taoiseach? This is your chance to be Taoiseach. Give up those positions. And he gave them up to two really excellent politicians.
Yeah, it worked out to his benefit.
It worked out to his benefit.
Yeah.
But that comes to the point is that even when you're the bigger party, the bigger player, you have to make concessions. That was the only reason why I brought it up. We'll talk more about that.
Yeah, we will, because
days.
there's a lot I can say about that. Like what actually happened at the end of the rainbow was Fine Gael gained 8 seats and Labour got wiped out.
Yeah.
So, and John Bruton's maxim, every time there was an issue, he said, the better the government does, the better Fine Gael will do, because we were languishing in the polls. So give DL credit, give Labour credit, that will just help the government. And it was a very clever strategy.
Except Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are not doing that now with the Greens, are they? Anyway.
No.
Okay. But
so can I
what's
make
your
a second point?
The
second point is this, that there is a general feeling that there's a tailwind behind Harris, behind the government, and behind the government parties, FF and FG. And Stuart Kenny rang me and he said, Ivan, how many times since...
Sorry, this is Stuart Kenny, the bookie, formerly of Paddy Power.
And has very good result instincts in politics. He said, Ivan, since 1970, how many times has the total number of government TDs increased in a general election? It's hard to think, there's 77 and 81 and 82 and 87 and right through to the president. I said, not very many times. He said once in 2002 when Michael Noonan led Fine Gael and there was the opposition was almost replaced. I stood down in that election and it was a disaster for the opposition. But in every other election, the total number of government TDs went down. I think even if you allow the Greens to have a bad day, the prospects of it being automatic that Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are going to do really well are not sustained by some of the constituency problems. And the second thing is, because we've said 2024 is the year of elections, every election virtually within the continent of the EU that's been held, the outgoing government lost seats. And so therefore, you're looking to defy history and you're looking to defy these 3 black swan events of COVID, Brexit and Ukraine, which have all meant that the government incumbents got it in the neck. And I'm just saying to Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, hold your horses there now, because when you go to ask the audience question, like in Millionaire programme, you sometimes get the wrong result.
Okay, and it's interesting that you bring up 2002, which I think is very relevant. There's been a lot of talk about 2007 recently, and people are suggesting, look, Bertie Ahern's government got back in because, well, there was a couple of reasons. One was people didn't seem to give a damn about his personal financial situation, even though that was what the media and the opposition were focusing on. And indeed, there are people saying, well, actually, let's not get too worked up about the Sinn Féin difficulties, because once the election campaign starts, a lot of the voters are not going to be worried about the internal mechanisms of Sinn Féin or what they did. They're going to be looking to what Sinn Féin promises them if they're in government. So there's a lot of premature writing off of Sinn Féin going on in some quarters at present. That's the first point in relation to 2007. And would you believe, I've actually forgotten what my second point was.
Would you believe it? Mark Fitzgerald, son of Garrett and the boss and creator of Sherry Fitzgerald, said to me, Ivan, you know the best election you ever had? He said it was 2007. I said, Mark, I stood in 8 general elections. I didn't stand in 2007. He said, no, because you see, I was promoting Celtic bookmakers' prices in every constituency. And it was fairly USP at that stage. And I was on every programme under the sun. I hadn't worked in radio or TV at this stage. And I was literally ubiquitous. And, with my predictions. And I did it in a kind of like you'd be talking about a greyhound race or a horse race, which was different to the way people spoke, much more cynical kind of narrative to it. So, but like at the end of the day, I remember that election, and I remember in 2006, I pinched myself when I says, in 2006, I made 80 grand a week, 4 million a year for Ivan, right? The betting business was just a Klondike. Unbelievable. Had 60 odd shops. I saw in 2007, there's a recession coming. Builders were running out of cash. The bubble was starting to burst. And so therefore, I would just say, when I read John Lee's piece that you sent me in relation to Party like 2007, well, we know what that led to in terms of the hangover.
But actually, you've now reminded me of what my second point was in relation to 2007. I suspect there were many people at that stage who were becoming fearful that the party was over, but they actually became fearful of change. And they re-elected a government in the hope that they could actually...
Out of fear, almost.
Yeah. And I think there's a certain degree of what Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil are going to do is, no matter what you think of us, no matter how badly you think you are, can you take the risk of putting left-wing parties in charge? What will that do to all the corporation tax revenues that we've become dependent on? And you might be giving out to us and saying you're not building enough houses. But how many houses do you think this lot will build if they get in? And I'm not saying this as an endorsement for them or anything like that. I'm just saying I suspect that that is going to be the approach that they take. We need to take a break, and we have lots of things to come back and talk about, particularly the Dublin Central constituency, Heather Humphreys and Jackie Cahill and various others. So let's do that in the second part of Path to Power after this. Welcome back to Path to Power. So, there's been so much since we last spoke.
There was one other point I want to make about the generality of my feeling about the election.
Go for it.
So, there's a feeling that, and we would have discussed this many times over the year, migration, unfair distribution, unlimited numbers, all that kind of far-right concerns, and that was a huge issue in the local elections, and housing will be the two main issues. I have a kind of feeling that the banana skin for the government is that, so normally the Minister of Education would say, look at what I've achieved. I've got 12 billion for education. I've reduced the pupil-teacher ratio at primary level to 23:1. I have extra special needs teachers, extra SNAs, blah, 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 blah. The script is this. People are going to say, hold on a second, 12 billion. So you're the crowd of wasters, the Hut, the Bike Gate and the National Children's Hospital. I think one of the difficulties they're going to face is that and I was actually shocked because I was doing a piece of research work and because usually people start with 2020 for public expenditure historically. So I started with 2019 and I actually saw, coincidentally, you sent me an article from Donald O'Donovan of The Independent about it. Total expenditure in 2019 was 77 billion. It was to be 105 billion this year. So that's the bookend of both ends of the lifetime of this government. It'll be 108 billion and rising. So that's gone up 40% in a relatively short period. Now, you could say, okay, well, there was COVID and there was cost of living and there was this...
Population expansion.
Yeah, but a lot of those things right now aren't a factor. They might have been a factor over the period. But the point is this, I think they're going to find that where you normally say, look at the resources we provided, that'll actually be flipped around to say, look, have you got value for money?
No.
And conflating money with outcomes are two different things.
I'll take a slightly different approach on that, although I agree with that. What I would say the issue is people look at smaller numbers than bigger numbers. So they look at the average price of a house rather than the government saying we've put 4 billion a year or 6 billion a year into housing. The 9 million in relation to the pouches was part of a near 12 billion euro budget. What does a 12 billion euro budget mean to voters? What they're more worried about is, is money been wasted by paying on the pouches? Why am I having to pay so-called voluntary fees in my school when it's supposed to be free education? Now, the government can argue that, well, what people will notice is the free book scheme, things like that, or it will notice the free meals in the schools. Those are actually the things that are far more pertinent to many voters because they impact directly on their lives. So the big numbers, the big spending, I think washes over many people. The issue is how it directly... But they do not like the waste, and they do... And the National Children's Hospital was an issue in the last general election, and it's an issue again. And actually something that I've been writing about for the Business Post for this weekend as well, is that a lot of the time money is promised for things and it's never spent. I mean, we mentioned it when we were down doing Path to Power Live down in the Cork Opera House, and I brought up the issue of the Cork Events Centre, which the Enda Kenny posed for photographs breaking the ground in 2016 on the cleared site in Cork with Simon Coveney and with others. There has nothing been done since. They're sending it back out to tender again. 8 years after Enda Kenny appears for the photographs, the thing is out for tender again. There's 1.8 billion put aside for the redevelopment of Cork City. There's minimal advancement has been made on that. There's $1 billion for a Lewis. They announced a Lewis for Finglas last week for 2031. There's a Lewis for Cork for 2030. There's nobody believes that it's going to be put in place. There's announcements made all the time for spending. So actually, if they actually got about doing their spending, can you only imagine what the 108 billion would actually go to?
So I had just 3 things on that. Thankfully, should be added to the word that the National Convention Centre in Cork hasn't been built.
No, it's
because
the
it's
Cork
hard.
Event Centre.
Well, put it thankfully is all I can say, because it'd
Why
be another
thankfully?
white. It'd be another white
No, it would
elephant.
not be a white elephant. Sorry, I'm going to speak up for it. Cork City has many of the same difficulties as Dublin City
They can't fill
Centre.
the Opera House. Give me a break.
No,
So
you
anyway.
couldn't fill the Opera House. They can fill it for many other events. And we got a good crowd there. We had about 800 people there. Sorry, if you had a 6,000-seater theatre there thing for gigs and stuff like that, in addition to having the temporary facilities put up every year at the Marquee by Peter Aiken, you could also be running conferences and things. At the moment, Cork is very limited in its conferences because hotel ballrooms can only take a certain amount of size around. If you have these locations, and it'll be good for tourism and for hotels and bringing life into the city centre, Cork City Centre needs something like the event centre to give it a boost in the way it does.
More special pleading. I know it when I see it. But anyway, just to say on the waste thing, which I think is the best line of attack against the government, given the sort of tsunami of resources that have been poured to every problem. You mentioned 2. The hot meals in the thing. Primary schools. I had reason this week to be doing some research where I had to contact some principals of both primary and post-primary schools for a project I was doing. And so I rang them, and they're nothing to do with the ITO, they're nothing to do with politics, and they said to me that most of the food ends up in the bin. They won't even take it home.
Yeah,
and so therefore
waste, yeah.
there has to be some inspection system. And
sorry,
on the books...
it's not just that in the food. Sorry, there is an enormous amount of waste. Also, an awful lot of the food, it may be hot, but that's about the only nutritional value that it has to it. If we're trying to be promoting healthy eating, then reheated chicken nuggets, and when you don't even know how much of the nugget is actually chicken, is not necessarily the best way to go.
I got an earache from a school principal who told me that free books, absolutely wonderful. The school administration have to order the books, have to then put all the school books together for Mary in a particular class, and they said no extra staff to do that huge administrative part. So really popular with the parents, really unpopular with school management. But I'm just making my example that just throwing money at problems does not automatically but secure popularity. But what about another Saturday night shocker with Heather Humphreys?
Well, nobody saw this one coming. I mean, this is a woman who only recently, 6 months ago, if it's even 6 months ago, was elevated to the position of deputy leader of Fine Gael. This is a woman that people were talking about as a potential presidential candidate because she ticked an awful lot of the boxes. Female, Protestant, from the border, bridge builder, all the rest of it. Ordinary common sense woman from her background in the credit union movement. And suddenly, she's gone.
So I put it like this: my default position on all this: Eamon Ryan, Simon Coveney, out of cabinet, career over, move on, and immediately reappoint someone else. That happened for deputy leader, didn't happen for the ministry. And the first thing you say is, you have a bit of a hard neck now leaving it this late. You had a year to say, the last of the chalk ices, this TD is gone, Damien English left it late, Ringer left it late, but this was extraordinarily late. So I actually rang up someone and said, how is it that the party isn't urinating all over Heather Humphreys for her disloyalty of staying stum so long? And then I actually stumbled across the truth, which was in July, she had a health problem, which was a genuine health scare. She was feeling unwell, and she went to the party leader and said, this is not business as usual. And he said, well, look, go away and think about this. It's a big thing for the party. We're at a moment of, exodus and so on. And she went back to him in late August and she said, no, I've considered this. I've considered the party. I've considered everything. And
she's quite entitled to, and you have to respect somebody if they have.
But she was unambiguous
reasons.
about it. She was unambiguous, and Fine Gael have been not only in secret but in complete denial about the reality of this. The situation was the convention had not been held, but the understanding was, in my dialogue with everyone in Fine Gael, was the candidates will be in Cavan, Councillor T.P. O'Reilly, and there's a kind of hereditary line of O'Reillys being former TDs and so on, and Heather in Monaghan. And the situation is that there isn't. It's just like Mayo all over again. Ringer steps down in a ticket that would have been straightforward Dillon and Ring, Alan Dillon and Ring, that it would have been Heather and TP, and the likelihood only one seat. So now you have a situation that there isn't a ready-made successor. I think Aidan Campbell or maybe one other will stand with T.P. O'Reilly, and it's a mess. So they're going to run probably the wrong number of candidates, and they don't have flagship candidates that are guaranteed. So the people who are smiling are Pauline Tully, Sinn Féin, Brendan Smith, who I also heard was retiring. And so I had to check that with my sources, and they were adamant. They've been adamant about a few things, but they were adamant that he's not retiring. So, few things on Heather herself, right? So I have to say that I'm in a minority of people that within Fine Gael who actually thought, and she was elected in 2011. She was promoted very quickly to a cabinet.
Rolls without trace.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest with you, I have to say I interviewed her a couple of times when she was in the Enterprise Brief. And I put it like this, maybe, I always say your accent is a baggage that people have to get over, that I actually felt she was promoted to a level beyond her bandwidth insofar as that she actually, I don't think, got the details and nuances of industrial policy and so on. But whereas I think she did a great job in the 1916 centenary, because I remember as a small child in 1966, the 50th anniversary, and I was in school at the time. It was really Republican. She made it inclusive. Her grandfather actually signed the Ulster Covenant in 2012, and she is a proud Presbyterian, and she's unashamed about that. And I think she is a loss to the Dáil because she stands for a lot of things, but her finest hour was she was standing in for Leaders' Question Time, So Mary Lou was having a cut off the government, and who was standing in? Other Heather. You'd have Micheál would be next, and Pascal would be next, but she was standing in. And this was the time of the £300,000 house that Mary Lou was offering Dubliners. And said, 300,000, my son is building a house and got a free site and can't build it for 300,000. Would you feck off out of that talking about your 300? You're talking absolute in a real kind of common sense, guttural way of dismissing it. So, yeah, she's probably right. You know what I mean? So, I mean, all the while in Enda Kennedy's government, Heather is the bee's knees. She's the rock of common sense. She understands rural. She has a deep connection with rural women and all this kind of thing. But I actually kind of missed it. I didn't get it.
Okay, just a couple of things though on her. And it was noticeable that in the run-up to the budget, she was behind the idea of greater increases for pensioners from those who were on unemployment, job seekers benefit, which was shot down by Fianna Fáil. But it was interesting that she wanted to reward pensioners more. And one of the last things she's doing in the department is if those who are on job seekers benefit don't turn up for interview, a 90 quid fine. Mm-hmm. And this has got a lot of people jumping up and down. This is outrageous if people are on small amounts of money, 230 or whatever a week. €90 has an enormous impact.
It's per week. It's not a 90 once-off fine. Yeah. It's 232 down to 142.
Yeah, this has an enormous impact on their income and all the rest of it and stuff like that. But I think you see that she would be going to a certain cohort, which would say common sense. Well, yeah, if they are getting the job seekers benefit, they have to turn up for the interview. Why wouldn't they turn up for the interview?
And the kind of Presbyterian thing would be a bit thrifty.
Yeah.
We're not going to waste money. No, and in terms of that, ironic that she was in charge of the hot school meals, but as we spoke about earlier. But what I would say is this, she is another gaping hole in Fine Gael's attack force. This is not of their desire to do it this late, along with Chatter, Kate O'Connell and different things like John Naughton. All the bounces of the last balls have gone against Fine Gael, and they don't have a heavyweight beast in the border regions. Like Fergus O'Dowd has stepped down in Louth, in Donegal, Joe McHugh has stepped down. Like the border counties, you need someone strong to be a big blue shirt in the beast against the Shinners, where, you know, those border counties are where Sinn Féin are strong.
Okay, and then could it be that now that the starting gun is about to be fired, that there are a lot of people maybe thinking, Jesus, maybe I don't want to run again. It's enough. Because what explains Jackie Cahill's decision not to run in Tipperary North? Fianna Fáil TD, I think he's aged 61, so he's well short of retirement age. But could it be that for a lot of people, they just feel, Jesus, he's worn out. And he does have a big dairy farm to attend to, doesn't he?
So I would consider Jackie a friend of mine. I met him 3 days in a row at the Galway races. He's one of those country people. He's blind in one eye. He has 300 cows. He's a former president of the ICMSA and is one of the most regarded politicians in agri-business circles. That would be the dairy co-op sector. And as a former ICMSA president, he carries weight. He's chair of the Agricultural Committee. And a lot of people who are in agri-politics never wore Wellington boots. Do you know what I mean? He would tick all those boxes. His nephew is working on the farm and he used to joke, you know, he'd be telling, oh no, that isn't quite right. He'd be very exact in his ways. And the nephew would say, well, you know what, you can go stick your job and so on. So I received a report from a Fianna Fáil source in early October saying, just tell me, Ivan, why has the selection convention not been held for Fianna Fáil in North Tipperary? And I said, well, I can't understand that because it is the most predictable constituency in the whole country. Lowry to top the poll, Kelly to get the left wing, Alan Kelly to get re-elected, and Jackie Cahill getting the Fianna Fáil seat. Whereas Matty is doing the opposite in South Tipperary. This was one county, one constituency. There's actually an extra seat. And Jackie has absolutely got a safe seat.
No Sinn Féin potential there?
No, Martin Brown is in the other one. And in fact, basically, there was a Sinn Féin candidate in Nina, but basically there was a row and they resigned. This is, you remember...
Jeez, an awful lot
I know,
Féin,
but that's a bit yesteryear. Yeah. So anyway, and Kelly's back on full throttle. So the situation is that I got a call and so I checked that out and they said, nothing to see here, Jackie will be the candidate. It's one of the safest FF seats. So you can imagine my shock when I got a load of text Monday night to say that Jackie has met all his supporters and announced that he's stepping down, albeit he was canvassing up to Friday. So put it like this, I cannot explain what happened here and I feel sorry for Jackie that it has ended in this. But one thing is certain, Fianna Fáil do not have a plan B. So there was suggestion that Michael Smith, who is from Roscrea on the edge of that his son, put it like this, no chance. They have no candidate. The fact of the matter is that the two possibilities a la Jackie will be his sister, Kay, who is a councillor. She was elected for the first time last time. But the much more, if I was having the pick myself, I'd go for Ryan O'Mara. He is a 20-something-year-old councillor and was the driving force behind Jackie's re-election. Now, he's no Jackie Cahill, wouldn't have the same agricultural pedigree or reach or being known. But in terms of even if he doesn't get in, he'd get in the next time.
There was one report during the week, I think it might have been the Irish Independent, which suggested that they wouldn't even have a convention there, that party headquarters will put Michael Smith's son in as the candidate.
Well, put it like this. Whether you like Michael Smith, who is, I think, a very reluctant candidate, the situation is, you just, look, the population is in Thurles to Templemore area. It is not in Roscrea, and Nina's already tied up. But if you look at it from an FG, so FG are even worse. They're running Dr. Phil Bugler. And you know where she's from? She's right on the Clare border in Killaloe. She's in Newport. So, like, this is a mess for the government. It's not only a mess for Fianna Fáil, it's a mess for the government parties. And Lowry and Kelly are going to be laughing. But if you ask me, because I was saying with my podcast...
How are they going to get enough seats to be re-elected when you keep spotting all of these
well, what I was saying is this. I said to Sean Defoe for the podcast, we'll do Limerick County first and we'll do North Tip first, because I can tell you now who's going to be elected. And now the apple cart is completely upended because I don't know what's going to happen.
I hope you haven't placed all your bets too early.
So
well, let's talk about Dublin Central.
Yes.
And my good friend, the editor of the Business Post, Danny McConnell, is practically salivating at this one. I hope he won't mind me saying this. Or that, because he lives in the constituency, although he lives maybe in one of the posher ends of the constituency.
Is it Glasnevin area?
That would be it, yes, right, okay.
Yeah. The middle class areas are so demarked there that I could nearly name them.
Okay, so Dublin Central, I think, is going to be one of the most fascinating bellwethers. And well, no, it's not going to be a bellwether because it's actually totally unique. You have Mary Lou MacDonald in the constituency as an outgoing TD, leader Sinn Féin. Pascal Dunn, who is there, Gary Gannon of the Social Democrats, and Nessa Horican of the Green Party. And I suppose a lot of them we would have said before all this stuff, Nessa Horican would be the one at most risk because if the Greens will go down in popularity, although she's an exceptionally strong local worker as well. So I wouldn't be writing her off at all. But now look at the new entrance into it. You would have Malachy Steenson, who will still be unlikely to win a seat, but could get a lot of votes.
He won a council seat.
He won a council seat, but he could get a lot of votes in the East Wall area because they've been involved in the anti-immigration issues. Now we've got Clare Daly, having lost narrowly in the European elections, lost her seat, has decided that she wants to land in here to try and get back into Dáil Éireann. And Jerry Hutch, the criminal known as the Monk, in custody in Spain as we speak, with the expectation that he is not going to be given bail if he is charged with money laundering offences. Last weekend, the suggestion that he was going to run as a candidate, not necessarily because he wanted to be a member of Dáil Éireann, but because he wanted to take as many votes as possible in the Dublin inner city area from Mary Lou MacDonald. Part of this as punishment for the revelations in the trial with Jonathan Dowdall, the former Sinn Féin councillor, who was close to Mary Lou MacDonald until she was no longer close to her, and who he believes tried to stitch him up in relation to the murders at the Regency Hotel in 2016. What a volatile mix in this constituency. Now, I believe Mary Lou MacDonald will win her seat, but here's one of the ironies. While Jerry Hutch could actually campaign from a prison cell and get a significant number of votes in some areas, I suspect Mary Lou MacDonald will have to spend more time in her constituency than a party leader would want to actually get the vote out. And I suspect that her running mate in that, I think
Janice
it's Janice
Boylan.
will be sacrificed, that she will get very few votes because every Sinn Féin activist will be out there, vote for Mary Lou. Any dreams I might have had of winning a second TD in that constituency, I'd say are well gone.
Well, I wouldn't waste my breath for 2 minutes talking about the Monk, insofar as that whether he's a disruptor candidate, he will have no impact in the outcome. He's given, support for a boxing club in the area, but he has no traction, and it's just a sideshow. So that Clare Daly's involvement in this race is deeply significant insofar as that I think
Who will she appeal to?
Well, hold on a second. She'll appeal to quite a lot of people who voted for Tony Gregory and Maureen O'Sullivan. So number one, the understanding I had was that Clare Daly is not like Mick Wallace. One is 56 and one is 70. Mick has been through a bereavement, and it was quite ironic. And they are joined at the hip in terms of politically. What happened was in 2012, they were both public representatives for the Socialist Party. And I don't think there was too many others. And in 2012, Mick got into hot water over VAT and other issues. And he was expelled from the Socialist Party. And in sympathy, she left with him. Okay? So that's what I mean by joined at the hip. And they both went on to be MEPs, I would say pro-Putin, but others would say other things, and so on. So the understanding was that she was interested in running the Dáil. And she has a sidekick, a councillor called Dean Mulligan. And Fingal, which has always been her area, from Skerries right down to Swords and Donabate and Donamead, I should say, and all those areas in between, she has a strong, solid base there. And even the Euro elections, she had a strong base there. The idea was, because this is split into 2 3-seaters, that Dean Mulligan would run in one and she would run in another. And it was established where that would be. So imagine my shock on Southeast Radio with Alan Corcoran on the morning mix last Thursday, who comes on only the bowel Clare to announce that she was standing, quite a bizarre place to announce you're standing in Dublin Central. So basically, my understanding is that there still is a cohort of people who supported Maureen O'Sullivan, who retired in the 2020 election, who feel that none of the 4 TDs that you mentioned actually represent them. Now, in the second podcast, I'll talk to you about the Greens as part of my research, but there's no doubt, in my opinion, that Nasa Hurricane was on the borderline. I would put Gary Gannon ahead of her in terms of that left-wing constituency. So I think Pascal is in a different market. He's more in the Danny market in Glasnevin.
So can I suggest that last time round there were whisperings in the days before the general election that Pascal's seat would be in trouble? I suspect,
it's a good move.
Yeah, but I suspect this time round that he must be very confident that with all the opposition to the government votes splitting all over the place, that he's very well positioned to regain his seat. And then that brings in the issue of Mary Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, that's his route to goal.
Yeah,
insofar as, like, the point is this.
Will she finally make it? I mean, God knows, how many times has she tried now at this stage?
Well, some of the polls I'm looking at have Fianna Fáil at 11% in Dublin, and therefore she would be the wrong side of that line. She has been labouring in the vineyard going back to Bertie's time, but I think of the ones you'd look at, Shane Moynihan in Dublin West, Shay Brennan in Rathdown, she would be on the weaker of the wish list of new TDs they would have. But I want to get back to Clare, because I think Clare is going to get elected. First of all, there is a strong left-wing vote. Whatever you say about Clare Daly, she is pugnacious. She will make an impression in the campaign, both on the doorsteps. She has a track record in relation to feminist issues, the X case. She would be one of the first to be in Shannon with the overflights. She will find a way to put herself in the centre of this. And I just think that it is a perfect fit for her, Dublin Central. I think her national profile allows it. And
she'll irritate the hell out of Sinn Féin, won't she, in that constituency?
Sorry, Janice Boland, but whatever happens, Janice won't get elected. No. The chance of a second seat there. But
Mary Lou will. I mean, Mary Lou has had experience of not winning elections. If you go back, she expected to be elected in that constituency in 2007 when she was an MEP. She didn't. She lost her seat as an MEP in 2009. But you would have to suspect that Sinn Féin will pull out all the stops in this constituency to make sure that Mary Lou McDonald gets elected with as high a vote. She will, and with as high a vote as possible. I mean, you remember all the sort of the trolling that used to go on about Leo Varadkar only got elected as the last person, so how could he be Taoiseach? This sort of people who didn't understand how the voting system works. I mean, it's very likely, very possible that Mary Lou McDonald will not top the poll or get the first seat in that constituency.
Well, we'll put it like this, just to show in the length of the last year, in their terms of a second seat in Dublin, and given they have 2 seats in, Owen O'Brien and Mark Ward in Midwest, this will be penciled in along with South Central, along with South West, as one of the certain ones where they will get a second seat. I see now no prospect of that, but I think it would be an exaggeration to say, like this. The other thing interesting about Dublin Central is when you see the count, you'll see, so-and-so gets 17,000 votes. Even in Dublin Bay North, Denise Mitchell got 21,000 votes. You can get in Dublin Central. Like Pascal might get 5,000 votes and stay in. It is the lowest turnout of any constituency.
Well, actually, just as well, that's going to be you got a bit of pick up on what you said last week about, I think Pat Leahy in the Irish Times picked up on what you said about the flats in Dublin inner city and the flags. That traitors joke by Patrick Keelty on the Late Late Show.
What did you think about it?
I actually would have a degree of sympathy with Sinn Féin in relation to it, in that... satire, I mean, people make jokes all
and there
the
is
time.
a programme called The Traitors, and it is coming to RTE.
It is.
I thought it was actually funny, but then when I saw RTE, like what they should have done, run the joke, right? But then say, apologise, because then, but you see...
But I don't think it was particularly well delivered, which was the funny thing, was that the screen went up, the photographs of Mary Lou McDonald and Brian Stanley, everyone got the joke laughing. And then the fact that he emphasised Sinn Féin traitors...
He didn't need to.
He didn't need to. That was sort of like ruined the punchline.
And Norton does that particularly well, where he just puts up the photo and they laugh instantaneously.
And you don't go any further. My God, now let's come to a bad thing when the two of us are analysing comedians. and how they deliver their jokes.
The politics of this is very clear.
Yeah.
What do you expect for 725 million? The least you expect is a little bit of support in the immediate election.
Well, you see, but that's really interesting. I see, what happened in the last week. I thought this has been interesting as well. That there has been a certain
pay for what you get in this
a certain degree of cop on amongst the government parties where they've almost let the Sinn Féin sex scandal sit now. That they've actually decided not to keep punching. So they didn't complain about Mairead Farrell getting the job as the chair of the Public Accounts Committee instead of Brian Stanley. They let it run through. Mary Lou MacDonald makes her statement in the Dáil admitting, well, actually, yes, the guy that our senator was sending the text to was actually under the age of 17. I thought they've let it go. But actually, funny enough, I didn't realise until I read it this week, just Neil O'Donnell, just how embedded in Sinn Féin, the IRA, he is. I mean, his father and mother both served prison sentences. And that sort of explains why he got the good send-off despite the circumstances from Mary Lou.
He's Belfast royalty.
Yeah, the IRA, Sinn Féin royalty, and that still seems to matter quite a bit.
But the bit that got me smiling was Clare Stanley taking the Sinn Féin nomination to be on the committee of the region. So first of all, this is the Junketeers sinecure beyond all, whereby they not only have people who can go to 2 or 3 meetings a year across the 27 EU states, but also they have, if you're not available, well, we have a junket for someone else. They have alternate members. It is just typical sort of,
But hold on.
So each party gets so many nominees. Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil could get 2. Sinn Féin had 1.
So her husband gets thrown out.
So she has to choose. She has to choose between the party and her husband, who are going in differing directions in the hustings. My understanding is she's going to be supporting her husband, and that she's going to resign from Sinn Féin in due course. But it didn't stop her taking this job anyway. Good luck with the travel. Bon voyage.
Please, can we get transparency in that story? We still haven't found out what's supposed to have happened. It's been all pillow talk about what's happened there. But anyway, hopefully we will at some stage find out. Look, we have lots more to talk about. On the subscription edition of Path to Power, this is the one that you get for free. We have another one where we do a bit more gabbing and where we actually also answer your many questions that come in to email at pathtopowerpodcast.com. We will have lots next week on the American election as well as domestic issues. But please subscribe to the extra edition as well if you want a little bit more information as to what we think is going on in the world of Irish politics. So until the next time, from me, Matt Cooper.
And from me, Ivan Yates.
And a big thank you to Aidan Power, our producer. We'll talk to you again soon.